Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for being here tonight to this edition of the Albers Executive Speaker Series. My name is Joe Phillips. I'm Dean of the Albers School. I want to welcome everybody. This evening, we're delighted to have Benson Porter, CEO of BECU, with us as our speaker. In case you don't already know, BECU is the fourth largest credit union in the U.S., and also the largest Washington-based financial institution. The title of his presentation is Leading Beyond the Balance Sheet. But to start, I would like to introduce Father Steve Sundborg, President of Seattle University. Father.
Thank you, Joe. And I always like to just say a word at the beginning of one of the Albers Executive Speaker Series. We've just come from an event where we've thanked people who are on the advisory boards and mentors in Albers. And the mentorship program is now in its 28th year. And over 300 students in Albers are being mentored by something like 160-some people in business. It's a wonderful program. It's part of the excellence of what Albers School is overall. And I just like to recall for you what this Executive Speaker Series has been like for this academic year. We started in October with Scott and Ali Svensson, from the co-founders of Mod Pizza. In November, it was Nick Hanauer, a venture capitalist. In January, it was featured speakers on a diversity and inclusion panel of Margie Elliott, Denise Merle, Laura Swap, and it was moderated by Holly Ferraro. In February is Brian Mistel, from President and CEO of INRIX. And last time in April was Kevin McAllister, CEO and President of Boeing Commercial Airplanes. So my congratulations as President, and extraordinarily proud of the Albers Executive Speaker Series. Let's thank all of the faculty, the staff, and especially the Dean of Albers. Thank you very much.
You don't get to go. So, Father, please. Father, you don't get to sit down yet, sorry. So as many of us know, this is Father Steve's 21st year as president of Seattle University, and the university has been celebrating his 20 years as Seattle U president this year. And he's received a number of well-deserved recognitions throughout the year, and now it is his time to receive one from the Albers School.
Oh, this is a surprise.
So we thought it would be appropriate to do so at a Speaker Series event, especially one that features an SU alum, because Father Steve has always been very supportive of the Speaker Series, and of course he's always been very supportive of the Albers School, often letting us know that there is no finer school on the SU campus, right?
That's right.
So we want to return the favor and present him with this plaque, which I'm going to give to him. And it reads, Father Steve Sundborg, in recognition of over 20 years of outstanding leadership and service, there has been no finer president at Seattle U.
That's great, Joe.
I have something else for you.
Am I done?
Yeah, no, you're not done yet. Yeah, we're not done. So we also know how Father Steve misses the Jesuit cabin out near North Bend.
Yes.
So he's always been able to go hiking from that location. So we're giving him a gift certificate to Salish Lodge, which is not so far from the cabin, and he can use it to launch an I-90 corridor hike or two. So Father, this is for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you. That's really thoughtful of you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. So thank you, Father, for your 21 years of leadership at SU. Before introducing our speaker, let me review the format. Benson Porter will make a presentation of about 15 minutes. That will be followed by questions from our panelists, who I will introduce to you later. And then we'll close with questions from the audience. So our speaker, Benson Porter, has served as president and CEO of BECU since 2012. Prior to joining BECU, he served as president and CEO of First Tech Credit Union in Palo Alto, California. He also served in several positions at Washington Mutual Bank, most recently as Executive Vice President and Chief Administrative Officer. He currently serves as board chair of the Federal Home Loan Bank of Des Moines, and he is a former director of the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco, and currently a member of the board of the Co-op Financial Services and the board of the CU Direct. His undergraduate degree in economics is from Whitman College, and his law degree is from Seattle University. So please join me in welcoming Benson Porter back to campus for this event.
Thank you, Joe. Father Steve, congratulations on the recognition, much deserved. Thank you for the invitation to be here, and Joe, thank you for the invitation. I usually try to delete the Washington Mutual references in my background, but I'm sure we'll get into that in Q&A perhaps. So the topic tonight is leading beyond the balance sheet. So that presumes that there is a balance sheet and financials, and really my premise tonight is that purpose helps drives the long-term success of an organization. It's the purpose and passion that really, I think, creates long-term value in an organization. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the BECU story, share some other examples of some other organizations to reinforce that point, and then obviously open it up for Q&A. And so before I dive into the topic, I wanted to give just a little bit more about BECU, so that gives you some context for where I'm coming from and the experience I've had at a financial cooperative. So BECU, as it was stated, is the fourth largest credit union in the country. It is it kind of sits between a for-profit company who raises its capitals from shareholders and a non-for-profit which raises its capital from grant making. We kind of sit in between. We have to self-generate our capital through the operations of the organization. So we have a dual purpose of both being financially responsible in order to grow our capital as an organization to support our growth and support our membership, but then also returning value back to our membership, like a regular company would in terms of its shareholders. So we think about return to member and net promoter score, the service we provide and the value we provide as being our true North Stars in terms of our organization. Our operating model is a little different than who we compete against. We operate a fairly thin branch network and invest pretty heavily into the digital services, recognizing most of our members really want 24/7 access that's best in class in terms of mobile and online banking. So we made that move several years ago before really as we started to spin out as an independent organization from the Boeing company. And then we also adopted some products that really kind of are hallmarks of our organization to really differentiate our value. One is if our members improve their credit score over the year, we'll automatically lower their interest rate on their loan the following year. Now it's a one-way street, so we don't go the other way if their credit score gets worse. But it's really, we view our purpose as helping our members' financial health, and it's one way we encourage it from a financial pocketbook perspective for our membership. The other is we want to encourage savings and thrift. We find that to be a fairly large challenge in society. Roughly half the population can't afford a $400 emergency right now, and so we try to encourage savings by paying our highest interest rate on the first $500 in a savings account for our membership, as opposed to most of the competitors pay your highest interest rate on our largest CD that you deposit with the organization. So we just try to spread it across our membership and really try to encourage savings. So that's a little bit of the way we differentiate ourselves, and again, it's our purpose space of trying to help the financial well-being of our members and our community. That is really the drive and the passion of a lot of BECU. So when I joined the organization 6 years ago, usually when you join an organization, they hand you a values card saying, these are our values. BECU didn't do that. I went around, met many employees, many offices, and I kept hearing about the importance of the member and putting members first. But I kept looking for what are those values that we use to talk about what we stand for. Couldn't find it, and so ultimately we had not actually generated the card. We actually were doing it, but we didn't generate the language. And thinking the organization is going to be growing, we're going to be hiring new people, we're going to be promoting people. We want to have a language to talk about what's important as an organization so we don't lose course with who we are. And so we went to our organization and we used a tool we used for innovation, which was people could suggest ideas, and then the population in the organization, the employees, would then vote, and the bubbles would go up and down depending on the support they would get. So we used that same tool to then vote on what do we stand for as an organization. And so employees, over 90% of our employees participated and said, this is more important than this to them. And they did this pairwise challenge about 70 times, answering questions, and it came up with 5 values that we felt were fairly authentic as an organization because they really came from the employees of what we stood for today. So it was what I was seeing as I went around, putting our members first, doing the right thing, owning it, knowing it, and being real. We have a real keen eye on being authentic in the organization. So all those kind of came through. And so now as we move forward, we can reference back to these values and say, how are we doing and pursuing those? And as we bring new people to the organization, or as we promote people, are they people that promote these values and keep our culture strong? So that's kind of the BECU story and how we think about our purpose. Now, it's not always easy leading an organization. So speaking of challenges, there's been quite a bit of press lately of some organizations that have faced some challenges. I think I may not be able to see all these logos, but we have Facebook, Wells, Equifax, and United, all which have had some fairly public, I won't call them stumbles, but they've had public relations situations. And so all of them I'm sure have written down values. It's not to say they don't have values, but somewhere along the way, they probably didn't fully uphold them, and then they're put into a crisis situation. In our case, we saw it as an opportunity to reiterate with our employees about was what we stand for. This is how we would approach these situations. Same thing happened in the Me Too movement, and so I have a blog, and I'll post out to it. So I think the communication side is fairly important. But all these organizations, they're working through their issues, and it can really happen to anyone. I'm not pointing out them, I'll point a finger at myself. BECU has had its own issues, and we look back on our values and what's our purpose to really try and navigate through them. The first was fairly innocuous. We changed our logo from the top left to the bottom left. And we got some reaction from our membership. Our longtime Boeing employee members thought we were de-emphasizing the E, the script E, and it didn't show up as strong, so they thought maybe we were de-emphasizing the importance of Boeing employees in the credit union, which wasn't all the case. What we were trying to do is to reflect all of our membership. We serve about 1 in 5 of the population here in the Puget Sound, and so our membership extends well beyond Boeing, and so we were trying to capture that in our new logo. And what's great about being purpose-based is your members kind of stand up for you. In a lot of ways, they responded on our behalf. And information travels so quickly now, social media, et cetera, and so in a lot of ways, yes, we had to respond, but also our membership responded saying, no, they like the emphasis on you because it's about people, and our purpose as an organization is people helping people, and so our membership handled that. In a related note, our new ad campaign emphasizes that, you own it. And so in that campaign, we did get some feedback from our membership saying they didn't feel like the representations in our ads represented them. And I think a backstory is important here. All of our advertising, whether traditional print media or online, digital, are images of our actual members. Members submit their photos for use in our campaigns. So everyone's in one of our photos is an actual member. And so the membership immediately said, these are real members. This is who we are as an organization. And so to the extent some of the membership didn't appreciate the diversity of our membership, it was a chance for us to reinforce that. And again, we kind of stood by our flag there, what was important as an organization. So there's some other very strong purpose-driven organizations you're probably familiar with. TOMS, which really lives by buy one, give one in terms of shoes. REI's committed to the outdoors. Stella's around clean water. BECU is financial health. And Patagonia really focuses on national parks. So all of those are strong purpose-driven brands, strong financials, but also strong purpose that I think leads to their strong financial performance, which I think is our case as well. So REI is an interesting story. In the late 80s, when the chemical BPA was identified as potentially causing health issues, they were one of the first to take the proactive step of removing all the plastic balls from their shelves and committing that they would not stock any plastic balls that contained BPA. They then offered an extended return exchange policy for any member that had purchased one, and they really used it as well, a negative situation, a chance to reinforce what their purpose is and do the right thing. So again, I think that's an example I think that we try to follow as well. I think you see that here. And so it's not just for-profit companies, but I have a high school junior right now. We're in the process of doing college visits. We have visited several Jesuit schools and have learned about the whole approach, not just the academic approach, but thinking about the development of the whole person. And I think that's a lot of ways of what we're talking about with corporations and organizations. Yes, there's the financial side of the organization, but there's also, I think, just as an equally important related to purpose, and give you a little bit more flavor for that. So there's probably a couple ways of looking at it from audiences. One is customers. What do customers think? Well, there's several studies. One was done by Harvard, which indicates that purpose-driven organizations outperform stock companies by 12 times. And then also going on to consumers are more likely to switch brands if they don't believe they're socially responsible. And the millennials in particular factor in a organization's social purpose in terms of deciding who they do business with. So there's obviously something here with consumers that's important, and all companies pay attention to it, whether you're for-profit or not for-profit, but it's clearly important with our customer base. An equal side of that is we are people helping people. So there's customers on one side of the equation. There are individuals on the other side of the equation. It also helps us recruit individuals, which is important. So this was a study that was done by New York University. It talked about employees that felt like their fulfillment, more likely to hold leadership positions, and more likely to refer other friends and family members to be employees of the organization. All were improved by being the social mission of an organization. And in our case, 50% of our new employees, our members, come from referrals from our current members, which we think is a fantastic recommendation of their experience they're having at working at BECU. So a couple of thoughts on what's all this mean in trying to be a purposeful leader. One is you have to be brave and lean into issues. Not all issues will be positive, and you have to think about how you communicate to your constituencies, to reference back to your values, always use those opportunities, sometimes learning moments, and staying grounded in them. So I heard a phrase the other day that I think that states this very well: be the flagpole, not the flag. And in society, while things move around quite a bit, trying to be that solid is important. So that's the part of staying grounded. And this is one piece of advice I often try to work in, is about know yourself. Organization owes its employees opportunities and feedback and those types of things. Employees in their mind know best what's going to resonate with them. And as you saw, employees that feel like they're working for a purpose organization that obviously aligns with their own value set are more likely to lead, be happy, refer friends and family members. So I think it's incumbent on all of us as employees to make sure that we do our own honest soul searching about what's important to us, and make sure we align. This is, and companies are recruiting you equally do due diligence on organizations to find an organization that is reflective of your values that you're passionate about, so that there'll be goal alignment both ways around. And I think that the data shows that the company will be more successful, you'll be more successful in your career. So that's something that I like to reinforce. Building a team you could trust. I have several of my colleagues here, and one thing when you find your way into the CEO's office is there's a bubble around it. And all bad news stops coming to the CEO's office. So you really need people you trust to tell you really what's going on. So as I was working my way through my career, when I was in middle management, I thought it was very clear what we should do. And it becomes much more murky as you work your way up to the lofty executive offices, because all that gets percolated up is good news. And if you only believe that, then you're probably not going to have a full picture of what's going on. So surrounding yourself by people that you have good working relationships with, have positions of trust, good two-way communication is really important. And then setting clear expectations. This, I think, is a good limiter on an organization. So it's responsible of the CEO and the executives to really model the values of the organization and communicate those through. Employees also have the ability, once those are clearly established, to hold the executives accountable. I mean, it's kind of a two-way street. Executives set the goals, but then employees are supposed to be executing, but they also should be holding the rest of the organization accountable to making sure that we're furthering those. So I think it's a good leveler in the organization. And communications, looking for every opportunity to reinforce values and the purpose is really important. If employees build passion in your organization by fact that they believe in where you're going, it's good to keep weaving that into communications, not only why you're doing something, why you're doing an acquisition, or how you're handling a challenging situation, which I think really shows the mettle of the organization and how much of a flagpole are you versus a flag. So that's my prepared comments. There was one quote I wanted to end with, which is one of our board members, been on our board for over 40 years, talks about the hardest job is made easy if the purpose is of great value. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. If there's a lot of excitement and purpose around where you're going, you'll find lots of people raising their hands to volunteer to take it on. And Roger's been on our board for 40-some years, was a Boeing engineer. No one would be on the board of an organization for 40 years unless they had a lot of passion in the purpose. So I think, again, just reinforces that. So, Joe, I think we'll turn it back open. Is this where you put the speakers to work?
Yeah, right.
That was quick.
So I'm going to briefly introduce the panelists, and then they'll get to their questions, okay? So let's see. Furthest from me is Marlon Decoto. Marlon is a senior finance major. He will graduate this June. He transferred to SU from North Seattle College. And Friday, he received the award for the transfer student graduating with the highest academic standing, so congratulations on that. He is a fund manager for the Red Hawk Fund, which manages more than $600,000 in university endowment funds. He is also a client manager in the Resource Amplification and Management Program, which is in our Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, where he coaches and provides resources to underserved businesses in Central District. And then next to him is Shraddha Nair. She has completed her undergraduate studies in accounting and finance with the London School of Economics, and she has several years of experience as a corporate accountant working with a private equity firm in Dubai. In addition to pursuing her Master's of Science in Finance here at SU, she's currently involved in several clubs and initiatives, such as she is treasurer of the Albers Graduate Student Association, serves as a graduate student ambassador. And after graduation, she wants to pursue a career in business valuation and corporate finance. And then closest to me is Allison Liang. She graduated last year with her Master's of Science in Finance. She works as a credit risk manager or senior analyst at JP Chase. While she was here on campus, she was an officer in the Women in Business Club and worked with the CFA Institute of Seattle, and her undergraduate degree is from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. So those are the panelists, and Allison, you're closest, you get to go first.
Thank you. So the first question is, given the unpredictability of business cycles, what advice would you give to someone starting their career in the financial services sector?
And you work with JP Chase.
Yes, I do.
Very good. I've had good fortune in my career to associate with organizations that were in a growth pattern, and that afforded all the employees there, including myself, lots of opportunity to try new things outside my normal disciplines. And so I think that's a criteria I would consider if I was looking at an organization is, you know, what do you think of their business prospects? What have been their traditional historical growth rates? And then obviously there's lots of information, Glassdoor, et cetera, and gives you a sense of what it's really like there. To again do that cultural alignment check, make sure it's a value set that you, one, could be comfortable with, and two, would be an advocate for, and you know, likely be a leader there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. So you mentioned a few skills that you think a leader should possess, but I think my question was, how important do you think emotional intelligence is? And do you think that's something you look for in your employees in any way?
Super, super important. I think that's a technical term. There's no black and white questions that come to an executive's office. Generally, things that are fairly straightforward that align with an existing policy, you would hope would be dealt with at a level that's closer to your customer or your member. So usually issues by the time they reach an executive's office are either fairly hairy, and I think the emotional intelligence plays in quite a bit there, because there's the technical answer, and then there's what's the right thing to do if you go back to the values of our organization. Sometimes those don't necessarily align. We may be in the right involving a foreclosure against a member because of lack of payment, but what's the right thing to do when you take the totality of the circumstances together on behalf of the membership? So I think that's where emotional intelligence probably plays in. You earn some gray hairs along the way. Yeah.
So in the past few days, I've been talking to a lot of people about this event, and something that came up very often is that people have a hard time knowing how credit unions can grow. Usually people associate growth with profits, right? So my question for you is, what's BECU's strategy to grow and show people the benefits of credit unions over traditional banks?
Sure. So I mentioned that we as an organization generate roughly $400 million in value as an organization through last year. And we talked about this at our annual meeting a few weeks ago. The organization chose to return about half of that to our membership in terms of better value, lower rates, better fees than what they would have paid at a competitor. And so we track that to make sure that we try to, in our pricing decisions. And then the other half that we then reinvest back into the organization in order to support our membership growth, which can be more offices, more digital investment, more infrastructure investment, more employees to serve our members. And so that's a constant balance if you think of a teeter-totter of every dollar we make, arguably we could and should return back to our membership, but for the better of our membership, we also need to support the organization and the growth. And we, as a cooperative, we can only grow as fast as we generate, self-generate the potential capital, and so that's a constant balance. Yeah.
How do you see technology's role in how we manage our finances in the future?
Well, right now we try to compete on a unique mix of value, service levels, which then equal trust. And that mix tends to be something we try to actively manage and make sure that we're hitting the right sweet spot with our membership. In terms of looking forward, if you think about how can technology help us better serve our members, we're already starting to deploy it in certain areas. Obvious areas are in marketing, trying to what's the next best offer to help our members save money based upon what we know about their situation. But it's not always about selling additional product. It may be just trying to help them avoid a late payment if we can see they're heading towards a potential financial pressure. So you can also use it proactively on the service side as well. And so we're actively working on how do we use artificial intelligence, because financial institutions, like healthcare, has lots of information about our customers. And have we done the best job of utilizing it? I think what we're learning, looking at some of the financial technology, some of the other retailers, is they use data much more for making suggestions of next best offer. And so it's not always about selling things for us, it's also how to use it in a servicing context.
Thank you.
What is the most challenging situation you've faced whilst working through the culture at BECU, and how did you overcome it?
So at BECU, I've been there for 6 years. We have a volunteer board of directors that's made up of our membership, and over time, I quoted one that's a long-serving member, but over time we have turned over about half of our board, trying to identify, like most organizations, what's the skill set we want to have on our board to help us be competitive in a more technology digital world. And so we've tried to recruit board members that way. And then also on the executive team, we've turned over about half the executive team. So I would say it's building the team has been the biggest challenge, and it's not necessarily a challenge, but it also takes the longest. When I was at Washington Mutual, I oversaw a group that had about 5,000 employees, and now BECU has about 2,000. I spend far more time on personnel matters as a CEO, just trying to think about the right talent in the right roles than I ever did in a larger organization. I think that's the difference of maybe the CEO role.
So can you talk a little bit about BECU's initiatives to give back to the community and engage with the community outside its members?
Absolutely. So we view community engagement as a key part of our value proposition to our membership, and so we try to involve our membership in those decisions. So one of our marquee programs we call the People Helping People Awards. Knowing that we can't support every organization in the community, how do you prioritize them? We ask our members to nominate organizations they'd like to see us support, and then we ask the membership to then vote on those nominees to then identify those that the organization will support. And last year we had $500,000 that came from member involvement with the cooperative. So every time the members swiped a debit card, we donated a penny to a fund that we then use to then donate based upon the members, what they nominate and what they vote for. And then as employees, our number one volunteerism event is all of our employees once a year go out to area high schools and conduct financial reality fairs. And It's great for going to a high school with juniors and seniors that are thinking about launching from high school and becoming independent. We go through a persona round where they're given a persona, job, family, and then they have to go out and make decisions about normal life, housing, transportation, entertainment, cell phone carrier. And our jobs as the employees is to upsell them, just like real life. We're staffing the booths. One year I staffed the auto booth, and it was pretty easy to upsell BMWs. Then the second round is, you need to balance your budget. And so it's all an automated tool that they can do on their smartphone. And they have to go back through and rebalance. And some of the quotes were priceless. It's like, it's really hard to be an adult. This isn't as much fun as I thought it was going to be. And those are great lessons to learn then, because what you don't want to do is make those mistakes and then have the black cloud of either excessive credit card debt or some other debt that then overhangs and then prevents from pursuing other opportunities over time. So we try to do that, and that's part of our community involvement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you please describe your experience working at WaMu and what you learned when you were there?
Well, you're at the new and improved WaMu, so. I started at WaMu. I was there for about a dozen years. I started what I would call the old WaMu, which was under Friend of the Family, if folks kind of remember that branding. In a lot of ways, it was a mutual institution that had just converted to become a stock institution, so it had a lot of the trappings of a credit union, mutual oriented towards the customers. And over time, as the organization grew, it doubled in size 3 or 4 consecutive years through acquisition. The culture started to have some fractures in it that I think ultimately contributed to some of the challenges later on. There's lots of new people coming in with different perspectives, and that's why probably I'm such a advocate for having a strong culture and making sure that's front and center, because I think it helps make sure we're all rowing in the same direction, having come from that experience.
Thank you.
So if there was one word that you could ode in the minds of your customers, employees, and partners, what would that be? Like, for instance, I would associate quality with Toyota. So in the same way, like, what would that one word be that you would want, like, your customers and employees to think of when they think of BECU?
I would probably put it in value, and I would use value in a broad term. It's both financial and the experience and the trust that they have. In the cooperative. I mean, one thing that's interesting, we're the 4th largest credit union in the country. The other credit unions that are larger than us are all public employee credit unions, military, Navy, Pentagon, state employees in North Carolina, all public service employees. And so we're the largest kind of community-oriented credit union in the country. And so I think part of our success has been that mix of community involvement and value, both service and financial. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
I feel like we're flying here, man.
Lately, we've been hearing a lot about the pay gap in all sorts of industries, especially financial institutions. So how is that an issue at BECU? And if it is an issue, how is that being addressed to be transparent and trying to make men and women earn the same amount of money?
So pay equity?
Yeah.
Okay. Important issue. I mentioned diversity in our advertising. In terms of an organization, we stand for wanting our employee base to represent our membership base. And we have, supporting the community, we have a very broad membership base. We have a big tent, and we are very proud of that, and we pursue that. We also try to do that on the employee side, and then from an equity perspective, we, like, fairly early when there was talk about minimum wage in Seattle, we made sure all our employees were at the proposed amount well before any legal requirement, because we felt it was the right thing to do. In terms of pay equity, that's ongoing. We are 70% female as an organization. We just had a majority female board of directors. Now it's a 9-member board. It was 5-4 female. Now it's 5-4 the other way due to some retirements. So we try to have diversity throughout our organization, and we track it, and obviously we try to make sure that the economics associated with that are comparable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How do you...
Round 4. Yeah, there's a lot more of them.
So how do you personally manage work-life balance?
My wife would say probably not very well. But that's I think where the purpose plays into my passion for what the organization's doing. So I view it as being an extension of personal. So I don't see it really being a balance. And CEO role is a little bit of a 24/7 position. Example is, at midnight you get the call, there's a fire in your data center. Okay, I'm not a fireman, the data center's in Spokane, I'm not exactly sure what I'm gonna do, but I think it's one of those things that it kind of comes with the territory. I mean, that's what you sign up for in the role, and you hope to be add to it, make a contribution. In that example, asked for an update in 30 minutes. Then sat there and looked at my wife and says, I'm not really exactly sure what to do about this. I hope the fire department's on the way. And fortunately, everything, the team got there and had a plan. But
Thank you.
I think you touched upon this a little earlier, but data breaches, they're so big now and security concerns are all over. And since you all do a lot of like mobile banking and everything, how do you all manage that?
Yeah, everyone heard the question about data security. That is a tough area. It's probably the hardest position to hire for right now, from what I can tell watching the marketplace. I'm on several boards which were mentioned, and a couple of those companies have just gone through the process of hiring new CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers, and the market is super competitive. I guess the way I think about it is, I think there's 4 lenses potentially to use. One is you want to try and keep bad actors out. So you try to build a moat around your organization to the point to try and keep them out. But you also recognize that hasn't worked for a lot of sophisticated organizations, and at some point there could be a vulnerability, whether it's through a vendor partner or something that you may not be aware of. And so you need to also have robust monitoring of what's going on within. So if something does happen within, you do find out hopefully sooner rather than later, so you can take appropriate action. And then the other piece of that is, if they do get in, have you organized your data in a way that it's not valuable or unusable, encrypted, whatnot. And so moat, monitor, make it invaluable, and then a communications plan if something does happen, both for internally to the organization, how are we going to rally our resources, and also to our membership. So we've probably used those 4 lenses in thinking about the issue. And then you try to do a maturity on each one and then say, where do we think we're light? Let's invest there. And part of that is we've built a 24/7 security operations center that we have people looking at glass 24/7, looking at all the monitoring, making sure that if there is something that we're aware of it.
Thank you.
So
nothing's more frightening for a financial institution than to think about a breach.
A lot of people here are graduating this coming June, including myself. So what are some of the most important qualities and skills that you think for newly grads going into the labor market these days?
Well, being a liberal arts major from Whitman, I put a lot of value on having experience that is broad, that can be applied, because probably whatever technical skills we've learned today probably will need to be changed, and kind of exhibiting continuing curiosity is probably really important, because I don't think any of us think things are going to stop now and it's just going to stay the way it is for a prolonged period. And so that intellectual curiosity, demonstrating it through whether it is academic or personal endeavors, I think is an important attribute. And then also that point I tried to make about soul searching what's important to you in terms of what kind of organization you want to align with. Make sure that's a two-way street. It's always really flattering to be recruited by an organization, but if the organization doesn't align with what you believe, it won't take you very long being there to find out that it doesn't feel right to you. And then you'll be, I wonder where I should be. And there is that place.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So now we're going to go to questions from the audience. So we will have a we will have a microphone in each aisle, and you should raise your hand, and we'll try to get you the microphone. So we have one way in the back, Jeff, way in the back there.
Hello, hi. I am a BECU customer, as well as a customer of another bank, but I choose to place most of my cash in BECU because of the benefits, values, financial health proposition that you've mentioned. My question is regarding the fact that your mission and purpose is not for profit. The question is, if growth were to occur at an accelerated rate, would there be additional customer benefits that I could expect? Or inversely, would growth be a detriment? And if so, what benefits would be removed as a result of that increased growth?
So the growth question is a really good one. It's something that we constantly grapple with, our board of directors and the management team, because arguably being the fourth largest credit union has allowed us to amass the resources to be able to invest in our digital franchise in a way that we have, which we think our members appreciate. A little story on that. It's not always rosy. So first time, I think my colleague is here, knows probably where I'm going. We rolled out our mobile app. It was something that we developed. We didn't buy off the shelf. We developed it with another company and then rolled it out. We were quite proud of it. It was really our first really development exercise, and the App Store rating was a resounding 2. So we did what we usually do. We started listening to member feedback. What can we do to improve? And then 9, 10 releases later, we're now at a 5, one of the top rated apps in the App Store for financial institutions. So it's just showing nimbleness and showing a propensity to listen to our membership is important. And I think we try to do the same thing in the growth. So each year now we are adding up roughly about 5 branches into the network, even though we, at this point in the cycle, you say, should we be investing in branches or should we be investing solely in digital? And that's one of those strategic decisions we're trying to get right. But if you listen to our membership, they would prefer to have an office right by their work and right by their home. Now, that's probably not feasible for all 1.1 million members, but our facilities people will be pretty busy building. But it's something that we have to balance. And so we would look at growth saying, can we do it sustainably without putting any kind of financial pressure on the organization? So one thing that we do know is that we do our budgeting based on what we think is the consensus of several economists in terms of we don't try to predict the interest rate direction. And so we use consensus as our baseline for modeling, and then we stress it. What if it's slower, or a lot if it's worse than expected, to make sure we stay in a financial zone that's the cooperative would stay healthy. And so with that, we know how much room we have to invest either in more value back to the member through better rates and fees or in other initiatives to add more services. So during the crisis, our membership wanted us to explore business services. At the time, we were offering primarily only consumer products. So during the crisis, there was a number of really strong bankers that were in the marketplace, and so we were able to start to build a small business service. And we now have 45,000 small businesses that are members of BECU. We're averaging about 800 a month. They're picking us as their financial services company. And so that was a decision. We think those financial resources help diversify our balance sheet and also help benefit all of our members.
So you mentioned that you're still building branches even in this digital age, and I was kind of wondering where you see the future of banking going, especially with all these new branchless banks that have come out and thus have lower overhead. So I guess what BECU will be doing to stay competitive in that landscape?
Well, a lot of the innovation in financial services right now is happening what they call financial technology companies, fintechs. And so we're spending a lot of time talking to fintechs, and what we can offer them is 1 million pairs of eyeballs in terms of customers. What they don't have is customers, but they have ideas. And so I think you'll see more partnerships between traditional financial institutions and fintech companies. JP Morgan Chase is taking a very active role in making investments in fintech companies. And so they're seeing that same trend. I think what we offer is being a smaller organization, we're more nimble to market to the extent they want to test out some of their theories. And so we look for what fits the value, service, trust, value proposition. So I think you'll see more development that way. We're not seeing branches disappear. They may have a different purpose. We see for our offices, we generally don't have a teller line in our branches, for those of you who are familiar with our model. And so what kind of financial institution doesn't have cash? So we made the decision that we think the higher value transaction for our customer service individuals is the one-to-one interaction and service around whether it's the mortgage decision, investment decision, savings decisions. And so that's where we have put our energy, and where we see the physical branch going is more towards those value adds. Now, to the extent, it's interesting, and this goes across all demographics. People still prefer to come into the physical location to open an account as opposed to doing it online. I think it gives a sense of confidence that there's someone behind that.
It's along the same line around strategy. and growing business development. It's like, as a BECU member, I'd love to put more of my stuff kind of under the umbrella of BECU, like
We're goal aligned.
car insurance, et cetera. And yet, I'm curious if that aligns with strategy. And it's a tricky decision sometimes in terms of where to go with your business. So it's good to hear about your thinking about financial tech orgs, but I'm curious if you could continue to elaborate on how BECU could service members in a wider range of our financial needs.
Well, like most organizations, we're constantly exploring what are our members seeking and trying to skate to where the puck's going, not to where the puck is. We're the #1 auto lender in the state, and so you obviously would expect us to look at all the products and services that are ancillary to autos, and insurance is one of them, and I can tell you we are actively looking at that space. Is there a way that we can add value to our membership? And so, we'll take those kind of initiatives and look at them and see if it makes sense to, and put it up against others and see what is that a good investment of our members' money.
Hi. In light of the financial crisis in Wells Fargo, what lessons have BECU taken away, and what checks and balances are you maybe implementing or have implemented to ensure you don't fall into the same pitfalls other financial institutions have fallen into, beyond protecting your value framework and ethical grounding?
Well, I think you probably heard me say this, but I think there's a key. I was up close and personal in watching the Washington Mutual decline. Was there during the great bang years, and then start to see a little bit of wavering, and it was really around culture, bringing lots of organizations together, and trying. So that was one area that I think I came away with. In the broader financial framework, there was a lot of failures in the country in the sand states, and those were states that saw the biggest declines, where the most speculation was occurring in residential finance. And so you could have been one of the most conservative mortgage lenders and only do 80-20 lending, 80% down or 20% down, 80% financing. And if you have a 40% decline in real estate values, even this very safe lender found itself not very safe. And so you saw a lot of failures there. So I think that reemphasized concentration is a risk in financial services. And so one thing I think a lot about is, with 1 million members here in the Puget Sound, if there was a hiccup in the Puget Sound, obviously BECU would probably feel it more than an organization that has a nationwide footprint. So we think a lot about that, and that when we do our stressing of our financials, we try to test that concentration issue a little bit. Oh, I think they're going back there with the mic.
You referred to the communication gap that can happen between the E-suite and the rest of the organization. And I'm curious what methods you like to best use, or common methods best avoid, to make sure that there's alignment between the purpose or the vision at the senior leadership level, the strategy, the direction applied in the mid-level, and the tactics that are employed at the first level and individual contributor.
It took me a while to realize the bubble that's around the CEO's office. I just assumed I would get the same flow of information that I'd always had working through the organization. So I think one is this recognition that there is an issue there of getting comprehensive information from all sides, and then looking for tactics of doing that, whether that's skip level lunches. We utilize things like a blog where I'm trying to be accessible and laying out, whether it's current events and offering perspectives from the BECU and my perspective. And so it's we put a pretty big premium on employee communication, whether that's getting our senior leadership together fairly regularly to talk about some of these issues, just so we don't run afoul. Like all problems, one's recognizing that you may have one. I think that's probably where I'd say was my big aha. It took me a little while. Being in the CEO role, this is my second organization being CEO, and I saw it at both organizations that people tend to only want to report the good things that are happening. They're not trying to hide it, but it's just human nature to kind of say, hey, this is what's happening, and usually it tends to have a favorable spin on it, so you need to maybe dig a little bit harder.
I'd like to ask a question. When I think of BECU, I think of people. And if you've got 1 million members here in the Puget Sound, I'm wondering, in regard to community investments, what are your members asking you to invest in by way of community investment, philanthropy, social issues. Do you find out what they want you to invest in that way by way of philanthropy? Or do you make your own decisions? How do you approach that area of your work?
Thank you, Father. I think there's two thoughts on that. One is, as an organization, I hope our membership appreciates that we put a premium on trying to help their and the community's financial health. And so financial wellness, financial health, financial education, first-time home buyer type programs are all something we as an organization take on because we have knowledge and expertise to be able to offer to share. So that's kind of our enterprise effort. And the other areas, it's a wide gamut from social justice issues, environmental issues, scholarships. It's all of the above. Think of everyone in the room. What are you passionate about? That would be our membership range of things they're interested in. So that's why we took this People Helping People award approach. Again, trying to be member driven. Allow the membership to speak about what they'd like to see us supporting. And it's great to see the amount. We've done it for 4 years now, and the past recipients of the People Helping People Award winner come back each year to, it's created this almost organization of community organizations that have received awards. And one was really great. One was a food bank, and another one was a not-for-profit that would go to residences and help harvest apple trees off of apples and take them to the food bank. They met each other at our People Helping People's Award and then started doing work with one another. So that's the kind of network that we're trying to create.
I was wondering too, there's so much that people are engaged in our region about homelessness. And there's been so much in the media and everybody's mind and where our city is around homelessness. I wonder, if that's a big issue for the people of our region, does that rise up to be a priority for BECU, or how does that work in terms of that kind of an issue, which seems to be troubling all of us in terms of what do we do about it?
Enormous issue for our community. We're seeing it show up in lots of ways. We approach it, one, we see that as being a critical part of financial health is housing. And so we contribute directly to a lot of organizations through grants that we do that are working directly in the space, affordable housing, low-income housing type of programs. And then People Helping People money can go that direction. And then what we do as a business, we do both apartment lending and single family lending, and we do some construction lending. And so we try to help it directly as a business through our grant making to not-for-profits that are working in the area. And there's numbers in the area that have been long track records that are being successful, that could probably do things better than us. And we also do work with other community institutions through partnership. One is Express Credit Union, so we work with other credit unions. That's one thing that's unique about credit unions, is that we tend to work with one another and trying to find solutions. So we all have to compete against the 5,000 branches roughly of JP Morgan Chase or B of A. And the only way we do that is by working with one another to create a network among all credit unions, so you can use one another's branches and one another's ATMs. So we also do some of the same type of work around community issues.
Hi. What percentage of your business is mortgage lending? And we're in a crazy boom. And when do you see that leveling out in terms of home prices?
We're already starting to see some tapping of the brakes, and I say that the data I'm using is mortgage applications. So we're saying that could be a slowdown just because of supply, but in general, mortgage applications are starting to drop, and we saw that when interest rates started to move. It was interesting how long the refinancing continued, just how many loans were out there to refinance that people hadn't refinanced sooner. In terms of housing prices, when I talked about concentration risk, that's something we pay a lot of attention to for the reasons I said. We are about 65% of our balance sheet is real estate secured, whether that's commercial or individual, and primarily individual. And if I could predict, that's why we do stress testing, because we can't predict with any assurance to protect our members' money. Yeah.
Hello. I'm from Brazil, and our financial market in Brazil is it's very different from here. And a few words for me that Brazil has been a developing market. In their financial system, we are very developed. We have, I don't remember when was the last time that I went to my physical branch in my bank. I believe it was like 5 or 10 years ago. I only use my bank through my cell phone or through the internet. I don't remember when I used a check in my life, at least on the last 5-10 years, and was very strange for me that I already went to the branches here in US more than I had in Brazil in my life. It's very difficult for me to transfer money here from one bank to another bank. In Brazil, like I do this like in 5 minutes at most. Normally in 1 minute or 2 minutes, I can transfer money from my account to any other account in Brazil. So what the reasons that you see that makes the financial market here in the US being so underdeveloped, under technology yet?
I won't take full responsibility for that, but if people wonder where is banking going, I think we could look to Europe and look to Asia, look to Latin America, and see a lot more progress than what we see here, particularly in the payments area, a lot more contactless payments. And so that's probably where we see things going. The Federal Reserve is working on a faster payments initiative right now, and so that's some of the backbone in the US system will get re-looked at. Australia just went through the transition over about a 2-year period, so it's probably a multi-year period that'll happen. We are trying to bring more technology tools for our membership, and so I'm looking at my colleague, Mr. Marshall over here, who runs our channels and most of our payments. We tend to be early adopters of things like Apple Pay, Android Pay, in order to start priming the pump for our membership to get used to those payment options. Zelle, people may have heard of, is going to be a new P2P platform. We're going to be an early adopter there. Again, under the guise that it may not be the ultimate solution, but it will be a step towards probably moving us closer towards that. We actually had some interns visit us from a Brazil credit union, and we learned quite a bit about the system there from that. So there is some exchanges going on internationally that we're trying to learn from.
One more question.
Hi, thank you so much for coming.
2 questions. They always start out.
Probably have 3, but no. The first one is this homelessness issue. Many people argue, I'm not sure of what are the statistics, but these are people that were displaced by this very high real estate prices here. Some of them could have been exposed to foreclosures and now lost their homes. So my first question is, and we saw a lot of abuses in the financial crisis with respect to the foreclosure process, and banks paid a bunch of fines, probably not enough, but certainly fines about the way they executed those foreclosures. So my first question is BECU different about their approach to foreclosures, and meaning somebody is homeless? And my second question, which is a total non sequitur, is the whole blockchain issue. And I keep thinking that it's going to go away, crypto is going to go away, and it keeps coming and coming and coming. And I'm, for the first time, kind of thinking about it in a credible way. So those 2 very different questions. Good to see you.
Yeah. So our credit union's different on the foreclosure side. I can say during the financial crisis, we set up a dedicated team that worked on modifications for our membership. The last thing we want to do is foreclose on a home. And that's true with most financial institutions. It is a very costly and laborious process. And so we would much rather work through modifications, repayment plans, et cetera, to try and work through. And so we had a dedicated team, and I don't remember the numbers now, but it was significant, the amount, and we would encourage members, call us if you think there's a problem so we can start working together on finding a path that will make sense for you, because obviously, homelessness is not something that any of us want to promote. In terms of blockchain, that is an interesting technology. It probably has more applications than I'm smart enough to think of. And so we have to work with others to make sure we try and think of everything. What we're spending most time as a credit union industry looking at is identification. Back to this data breach and fraud. Can we use blockchain for authentication for our membership that would work across the financial services sector? So there's a group in the credit union industry is working on that as a potential use case, which I think would be very valuable. There's also a group in New York called R3 that's looking at it from an institutional trading perspective that more of the big banks are supporting. And that has less, it still has the timeliness issues, but I'm not sure on authentication. There's a lot of transactions each day, a lot more consumer transactions than commercial. So I think it becomes how fast can the technology work to support it? I personally think blockchain, from what I know about it, could be a real game changer in things like title insurance. If you could have public distributed ledgers and not have to go through the title insurance process and save members a lot of money. If there was a public ledger we could check property against and make sure there's an ownership chain. So I think there's some applications there. They haven't obviously been developed yet, and I'm not threatening the title insurance industry, but that seems like an application that would make a lot of sense.
Great. Well, let's thank Benson Porter for being here tonight. Thank you very much for coming out, and good luck the rest of the academic year.